So, hey, everybody, again, my name is Q. I'm excited to welcome everyone here for today's ng-conf sponsored webinar. I hope you had an awesome ng-conf just a couple weeks ago. I think it's equally awesome that we're jumping back into webinars so quickly after ng-conf. Normally, we take a couple month break before we get back into it. And today we have a special topic, a super cool one that I hadn't heard of until I read the title. Reactive Forms with TinyMCE. I'm excited to learn more about it because I had never heard of it. But before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that the rules and the code of conduct, which I am posting now in the chat, are the same as those at any ng-conf live event. In short, let's be nice and respectful to ensure a productive and engaging session for everyone. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker, Marina, a developer relations manager with over 5 years of experience in full stack development, cloud, and AI products. Her bio's on the introduction, but I found it super cool that she's been developing since the age of 14, and she programmed her TI-84 calculator to quickly find the hypotenuse of a right triangle, which all I did with my TI-84 was play the little spaceship game that I don't know. I don't know who else has that, but since then she's continuously employed computer science to fuel her curiosity and tackle complex problems. Today, she's going to be guiding us through integrating rich text editing into Angular Reactive Forms using TinyMCE. This session is designed to enhance your applications and streamline your development process with Angular. So let's give a warm welcome to Marina as we embark on this technical journey together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Q, for the introduction. It was really sweet. And yeah, so let's just get started. I'm Rita, the Developer Relations Manager at TinyMCE. I worked for over 5 years in full stack development. TinyMCE is a rich text editor that serves over 1.5 million developers worldwide. And if you ever want to follow about more news about uh, TinyMCE, things that I follow on the dev world. Feel free to follow me at Marnessa Ghosh on all of these platforms to stay connected with the work that we're doing. Additionally, a fun fact about me, if you don't remember anything else, I love to travel and I've visited over 30 countries and I plan on visiting more. So with that, enough about me. I'm going to start with what are we going to learn today? So I'm going to go over very quickly what is TinyMCE for those of you who haven't heard of us. If you were at ng-conf, we had a table over there. We might have talked to you. And if you're coming there after, if you're coming here after ng-conf, really appreciate you stopping by this webinar. Then we're also going to talk about Angular Reactive Forms. This is not a new topic. It's a built-in functionality to Angular projects. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you can add, I'm going to demo how you can add TinyMCE to your own Angular project. We're going to add material components for the forms to look a little prettier. We're going to add the reactive form functionality, and then you're going to see how TinyMCE can very easily integrate with that functionality. And then finally, I'm going to demo validating reactive form input, right? All of that sounds good, but what did I mean by reactive forms? So I have something running locally just to show you what it is. It's basically at the end of the day, we're going to have some sort of form and you have to type in, this is a title. You have to type in a piece of content over here, and then you can have the ability for that piece of content, as you noticed, that submit button to become validated. And then once you hit submit, you can actually look at your console log and you will see this printed in your console. So that's kind of the goal at the end of the day for this workshop. And while this seems pretty simple, I also want to assure you that the development behind this is also equally simple. So with that said, let's get started. First, what is TinyMCE, right? TinyMCE is a JavaScript-based rich text editor component. It essentially allows users and front-end developers and full-stack developers to create formatted content within a user-friendly interface. So for example, if you wanted to type in some sort of product description. For example, we have a link, a screenshot of Shopify over here on the right. And you can see that from this screenshot, there's like a product description. So that piece of editor that you see that's TinyMCE. That's the component that we built. It's highly customizable, and it's also extensible in the sense that you have custom plugins, pre-built plugins, and you can change and adapt the UI to fit your functionality. So the UI that you see in our demo today is not necessarily the UI you would see on Shopify or any other platform, including WordPress, but all of those editors that you see on the internet is TinyMCE. So if you've ever typed a piece of rich text on the internet, you have most likely used TinyMCE at one point or the other. We, of course, have integrations into Angular, which is why I'm here today, React, Vue, Svelte, Blazor, and a lot of other frameworks. So if you want to deploy TinyMCE, you have two options to deploy TinyMCE. You can either do it with TinyMCE Cloud or self-hosting. So with TinyMCE Cloud, it refers to the fact that we have the editor itself, the component, it's served from Tiny's content delivery network. And this simply means that the editor scripts and any associated resources related to the editor are all loaded over the internet from Tiny servers, right? Versus the self-hosted option means you can download and host TinyMCE editor on your own servers. And this option is probably great if you need some full control over your web environment. The only downside to that is the whole maintenance functionality, because you really need to maintain your editor, constantly updated, especially for security updates. It's resource intensive because all of your scripts are stored on your app, and the setup is a little complex. So for this demo, we will be using the Tiny Cloud CDN in order to deploy it onto our web application. So let's move on to Angular Reactive Forms. What is a reactive form? We've all seen or filled out a piece of form on some sort of web application before. We filled out our name, username, and password, and until we've filled out every single application, there's validation, or until we've filled out every single field, there's some sort of validation that says, full name is required, username is required, email of this format is required. So that is a reactive form. Basically manages dynamic form inputs very efficiently, and Angular has a great sort of built-in module to handle this called the Reactive Form module. Some of the technical facts about Reactive Forms is that it actually has an immutable state, which simply just means that every time you change the form state, it returns a new state. So it does maintain integrity between the model between the changes, but it also means that if you don't add validation to that form, you're going to be submitting that form a lot, or the change is going to be happening quite a bit. So the second thing that I would like to point out is the observable streams. Reactive forms are actually built, Angular's reactive forms are built around observable streams, which means that the form inputs and values are actually streams of input values that are usually processed synchronously, which is why they're different from template-driven forms. And then finally, reactive forms are great because they make testing really simple, because you know exactly what your data is, and it's highly predictable when requested. So it's a pretty straightforward test, especially when you're doing front-end development. And finally, why does it matter? Reactive forms are very efficient, they're reliable, and they're also responsive forms, right? A user feels like I'm actually interacting with my UI. So it's a great experience, and TinyMCE actually fits in very well with these reactive forms. So you don't only have the opportunity to validate data within your inputs, but you also have an opportunity to validate data itself, data within a rich text editor. So with that said, if you want to follow along and start your own piece of project, go for it. I also have the working demo that I previously showcased over here at this tiny URL. So go to tinyurl.com, follow this link, or scan this QR code to just get this link. I'll hold this up here for a few seconds. And you know what? I'm also going to, when I have the opportunity, share with everyone in the chat the copy of the slides. Let me see. Actually, I sent it to, here we go. So everyone, here's the copy of the slides. Feel free to hop on and sort of follow along here as needed. So you kind of know what's coming up next, but if you want to start setting up your application, you can go for it. Awesome. See some people are joining the slides. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, first step is adding TinyMCE to your Angular project. So in order to add TinyMCE to your Angular project, it's as simple as just saying npm install at TinyMCE /TinyMCE's Angular component. So what TinyMCE does, so if you're not familiar with TinyMCE's Angular component, TinyMCE has actually created their own Angular component, which is simply just a wrapper around the main TinyMCE component. So it actually works well with the Angular world. So that's exactly what it is. So it's not very different from what you're seeing in the main core component as well. So, and to add that, you do an npm install. And then after that, you actually have to import the editor module and you have to add it to your imports. And then you do some magic and you add the editor to your HTML. And then you have to add an API key where you can go on this link in the slides and add it. So I'm not just going to talk about this. I'm going to live code this so that you actually can follow along to see like where I'm making these specific changes. So none of this seems like magic. So here, what you're going to do in your app component. So you need a little bit of familiarity with Angular before you get started with this project. You have, your source code, and then you have your apps code with app component.ts, where some of your logic, think of this as script.js. That's where all of your logic works. And then this is your HTML, where all of your HTML and how the app looks actually sits. So with that said, I'm not going to dive too much into how Angular apps work, but here you go ahead and say import editor module from TinyMCE. And then I'm just going to say here, I have my editor module over here, and then over here, I'm going to go ahead and create my editor. I'm going to call it for now. Might remove that later. But I'm going to say editor. And then within my editor, I want my API key, which I will not add right now because I think it's a live demo. And then let's add some initialization. So I want to add some plugins. I believe I added some lists, some link, an image, table, the option to get the code, help, and I also want to know what the word count is. That's a very simple editor. I don't think I need a menu bar for a form, so I'm going to say I really don't need one. And then I'm going to set the min height to 150, so it's not a huge editor. Go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to do that. Oops, did I do something? Live coding is always fun. Missing expected. Let's see. Cool. So let's add one at a time. There we go. Let's set that to false for now and set min height to 150. Let's see if that works. Perfect. Awesome. Now that that's worked, that is essentially what we do to get TinyMCE working in our editor. So I am actually going to switch screens over here, connect to the project. And then in order to get your TinyCloud API key, as I said, you can sign up for a free trial offer over here. If you click this link, it'll actually take you to this Angular rich text editor website. Shows you a little bit of details, but then you can say get TinyMCE. And then you can sign into your cloud account and sign up for a 14-day free trial where you get access to all of our premium plugins, including like the brand new AI assistant. So I'd highly recommend taking full advantage of that and checking it out. So once you sign up for a TinyCloud account through that link, you can actually go over here and just click on get your API key, and you should be able to get your own TinyCloud API key. So in order to make sure that I don't spend too much time showing you all my API key, I'm going to quickly plug that in and should actually be able to see a fully functional editor within an Angular app. And, it's a rich text editor. You can change it. Pretty cool. So that's how simple it is to actually just get TinyMCE up and running within your Angular application, right? So that is step one. And again, if you couldn't follow along with my live coding, then feel free to just check out the slides. I have all of the code up there in an editable format, so you can actually just copy paste it in to get yourself started. Awesome. Let's see. To me, sweet. Let's go on to the second part of this demo, which is adding material component. So why am I talking about material component? Like why specifically material component, right? And it's as simple as we want the form to look nice, even if it's a demo. And Angular actually has this material library sort of built out, and it's designed for accessibility. So we know that things within the material component is going to be accessible. And it's very nice design features. So I'd like to kind of embed that. And so this is not part of the reactive forms. So in order to just get your material component added, you just say ng add Angular material. And this is the exact configuration settings that I did for getting this project set up on Stackblitz. If you want to do this locally, or if you're following along locally, feel free to do that. Yeah. So once I have my material component, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the material card module and then wrap my editor around in that. So I'm going to go for that. And as I said, if you're not familiar, this is sort of how you do projects. So import, let's see. Angular. Card. Awesome. Want to wrap that around in a map module, import that, and then I'm going to go over here and say I want my editor to be wrapped around in that. So it's going to be, and let me increase the size. This might be a little tiny. No pun intended there. But yeah, so once we have the material card component module imported, all we have to do is say map card. And then I'm going to set the class. They actually have something for blogs that I enjoy adding for forms when I code them. I want my editor to be within this. Put that there. And then I'm going to actually set a title. And I'm going to call this TinyMCE and Reactive Forms. Sweet. Awesome. What this should have done is just wrap this in an Angular material card and given it some depth on the screen. And then because this is within content to be set here. Awesome. So once we've done that, we should have, you can see that the TinyMCE component is now within an Angular material card on the screen. I'll zoom back out just to show you how it looks. Once that has happened, we've started to make the UI look a little like what we want the forms to look like. And that was kind of the whole purpose of adding material components to it. Just a quick intro. Now, finally, I'm going to talk about adding reactive forms. So the first thing that we're going to do is just add a basic form control to our application. So in order to do that, what you need to do is we need to import Reactive Forms module, and we also have to instantiate a new form control um, within the app component JS, right? But before we do all of that, the first step over here is to create a submit button because what form doesn't have a submit option. So in order to do that, it's pretty simple. We're going to use the material component library to quickly create a form submit option. So I'm going to go over here to my page. Let's see. And I'm going to push that over. And then I'm going to say, I want to get a map button module. I want to get that from Angular material button. From live code typing is quite fun. So once we have that, we can actually go ahead and create a thing over here, and I'm just going to call it mat card actions. I want to align it to the end, and I want to put a button in that. That's a mat raised button. Awesome. And then that will just have not submit in there. So ideally what this should do is this, I should remove content because I remember that's messing up with the CSS. But once we have that, there we go. We have a submit button now for our form ready to go. So that's what that was doing. All of this code simply is just adding a submit button for a reactive form to work with. Nice. That looks great. It's starting to look more and more like a form. And now what we're going to do is add a reactive form. So here, this is where I'm talking about the reactive forms module and the form control. So we're going to import this reactive form modules that will give us all the functionality that we're looking for, as well as the form control in the template itself. And then we need to register it in the HTML template itself. So let's get started with that. So in order to do this, we have this app. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to go to my app component. And there we go. Import two things, form control and a reactive forms module. And then I need to import the forms module here. And then I need to do a few things, right? I need to say title equals new form control. Leave that blank for now. And then I need to set something here as a form. But in order to do that, let's see. We don't have anything right now. If you look here for us to test, and I don't want to test with the TinyMCE. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually just create. Let's just create a label and call that title. And then I'm going to create a simple input for a form to test this against to show you that it works. Okay. So ID, if I can type, title, type is text. And then our form control itself is titled. So that's where we need so yep, that's where we need to register the form control in the template. So that's what I just did over there. And I'm going to say this is for title. Awesome. So when I should have done that, that should have created a very simple input right over here for our form. And that is our title thing. So now how do I make sure that this is actually reacting to something that I'm doing, right? How do I make sure it's actually reactive? So to test this out, let's say on submit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to forcefully update this title to show you that it's reactive, right? So I'm going to show you that I can create a click. So whenever I click this on submit button, I want it to update the title. So no matter what I type in the title, this is counterintuitive, but this is just for us to kind of test out and have fun with the form, right? To see that it works. I'm going to say update title over here, and then say this, but title dot set value as TinyMCE is awesome. Awesome. So done that. Then I've done that changes here. And then I type in some type of title, Heroes of Olympus or something like that. Click submit, and then it says TinyMCE. So we know this works in that sense. So that is our first step for a reactive form. We know some sort of submission is happening. We know we can change the value of that submission, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty great, and that's kind of what the code so far would have shown you. This dot title was just a test. You usually would not include that. And then I added the update title over there just to test out our reactive form. But I want to add TinyMCE, and I want to have more than one input in my form, because ideally, if you have a form, you have multiple inputs. And that's when grouping of reactive forms becomes extremely important. So because forms contain several elements, reactive forms has two ways you can actually group multiple elements. You can either do it with a form group or a form array. So for the purposes of this demo, we're using a form group. So what we're doing is we're defining a form with a particular set of controls that you can manage together. And you can go ahead and look at the Angular documentation for more information on a form group. But in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch tabs again, go back to my code, and now I want to have a form group. So I don't need this update title, so I'm going to remove that just for now. Looks like I didn't. There we go. Awesome. And then I'm going to go ahead and take this off. This one. We don't really need that. So I want to have a form group. So I'm going to go ahead and actually import a form group. And the reason I said I needed a form group is because we have multiple inputs. We have a title input and we have this body input in our form. And we want both of these to be registered as when we click submit. So in order to do that, I create a form group. And then what I do is it's a little different, right? Instead of instantiating it new here, what you have to do is just say reactive tiny form is equal to new form group. And then here, let me zoom in. Okay. Here, you actually create what individual pieces of elements here. So you have your title, which is a new form control. And then you say your body here is another new form control. Awesome. So once you've created this, you officially have a form created, and you have a fixed set of controls that you can manage together with this specific form group, which is reactive tiny form. Awesome. The next thing you need to do is you need to actually go back to your component because this is going to have some breaking changes over here. And we actually should start by putting this all into a form itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just change this div to a form. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to call this the form group that we called it. And in this example, I called it a reactive form. So I'm going to call it that for now. And then let's see, I also had form control, which was title. So over here, remember when we did a simple form, you could just instantiate that as such. But when you have it under a form group, you actually call it form control name, and then you have each of these individual names defining that as such. And then within the editor, again, I go here, call it body. Okay. Awesome. And then that's it. That's the basic start of it. And then I'm going to show you how to connect that with it. So let's just make sure everything is working as intended. We don't see any breaking changes in the UI. Let's check our terminal very quickly. Looks like everything is good to go here. Change it one more time. Yep. Awesome. Once we have all of that, the final thing that we do need to do is react to this form, right? Make sure it's reactive, that when we submit it, we actually collect the value. So how do I know this form and the grouping of form actually is working and is going to give me all the values from the form? Well, in order to do that, what you have to do is very simply, let's create a function, not within this, but outside in the app component called onSubmit. And I'm going to say console.warn this dot reactive form dot value. So when we click the submit button, it should log in our console as I showed you in that demo, what the form's value is. Nice. So in order to showcase this, we need to go to our form itself, and then we should say, should use the built-in ng submit for the form. That will then print that out on submit. Awesome. Sweet. So we have the basic functionality set up, and we have our form set up over here as well. So now you can go ahead and type in a title. So for example, I'm going to type in Heroes of Olympus, and I'm going to type in a body of text, or it's Rick Riordan's series. Okay. And then if I click submit, if we actually open up the console, submit, we should actually see that change reflected over there. Now, let's say I decide to do some magic with this and I click submit again. I can see the reflected change submitted in the console. So I know my form works. That is great. But what about the fact that, let me actually show this to you, this functionality in a different browser, because that way you're disconnected to my project. Thank you. So if you open the console, remember I talked about reactive forms and the fact that the state is immutable, and I'd rambled a little bit early on, and the reason I'd rambled was because each change to this form returns a new state. So, and each time you actually submit, you can actually see that title, submit. Even if I submit like an empty form, submit, the action is still happening, right? We really don't want that. We don't want someone to be able to spam us like this. They should only be able to submit this form if they've filled in these requirements. That's how forms work, right? They shouldn't just be able to send us empty fields. So how do we fix that? It's actually really simple when it comes to uh, reactive forms. It's something called validating a reactive form input. So in order to do that, and you can actually even do that with the TinyMCE as input because it will monitor that for you. So let's go ahead and do that. It's pretty simple. The code for it, of course, is given to you in the slides, but I'm going to live code that over here. Let's hope everything works. So just import it as validate. Nice. And then I say that both of these are required fields, right? So if a user hasn't typed both of these, the title or something into the body, you should not be able to submit this. We're not done yet because the submission of the form happens when you click the submit button. So we need the submit button to react to that. And to be able to do that, we're going to say this button is disabled as long as if the form is not valid. So the form is not valid, it is disabled. So once we have that, this is the app component. You can see it over here, or you can also see it over here. As you can see, this button is now enabled. So even if we type in something saying Riordan's series Heroes of Olympus is a great read, it's not going to work unless I type in a title that says Heroes of Olympus. And similarly, vice versa, if I don't have any piece of text within my tiny editor, you don't have that in your title as well. So that was a simple example of validating reactive form input. Of course, there's a lot more that you can do within Angular for your validating these form inputs. There are ways in which you can also go even more specific into these inputs. For example, you can say, I need this to be formatted as an email address. There's a whole form validation guide on the Angular documentation that I will go ahead and attach. So you can do that as well. Awesome. So with that said, that is kind of like our end application, and was basically hopefully showing everyone the endless possibilities with Angular React forms, Angular reactive forms with TinyMCE, and how simple it is to actually put TinyMCE into your own reactive form, especially if you want rich text in a reactive form as well. So you can not only put inputs, this webinar was just to show you that you can also have a rich text editor right within your reactive form. So yeah, any questions? I'm gonna open up my question chat.
All the questions and
Yes.
comments have been done just in the chat, but you pretty much got them all.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So
Are
if
there
there
any
are any
last
other
second?
questions,
Yeah.
yeah, any sorry, Q. Any last questions for anyone? Could I cover pricing? That is a great question. I think Q was talking about that right before. So basically, TinyMCE has the pricing page is on our website. So you can actually go here to that URL and actually go to the pricing page. There is a free forever option, which is 1,000 editor loads per month with your cloud-based deployment. If you want the Cloud Essential plan, it starts at $80 per month. We do give you a free 14-day trial. We also have a yearly option that actually makes it comes down to $67 per month, and that gives you 5,000 editor loads. It really depends on how big your user base is, and if you're honestly doing this as a just for a hobby project or something, the free forever plan is perfectly capable of doing that. Of course, it scales up to $130, but if you're going over $20,000 editor loads, we just kindly recommend reaching out to our sales team and seeing if there's a cheaper option for you. Because at 130 per month, you're almost hitting 1,560 ish. So I would just recommend reaching out and seeing if there's a cheaper option there. But of course, we also have usage-based billing now as part of TinyMCE. So every, I believe, 1,000 editor loads that you go over, we charge a specific price point. So even if you're at $20,000, I believe it's kind of like $30 or $40 for every 1,000 editor loads over. So that is also an option if you're willing to just pay by usage as well. Is there any other questions?
We had
I
one
have,
question come through that asked just Angular forms versus HTML forms. I don't know if you want to extend on that, Will.
yeah, is there any specific questions on Angular forms versus HTML forms? Or is it just you want me to give you a comparison or what's better?
Yeah.
From my knowledge, I'll just say that if you're working on an Angular application, you just saw how simple it was to include validations by just importing validators and not having to have an if statement and creating your own logic behind half of these things. So in terms of basic functionality, the fact that it requires less code within the component, it actually lends itself to cleaner code. I just highly recommend if you have a reactive form necessity and you're using an Angular project, it kind of comes with the platform, so or with the framework. So feel free to use that, right? But of course, if you're not using Angular and if you're using sort of plain HTML or vanilla JS, that's they do have a traditional way of handling forms and web pages, and that's perfectly apt and capable. It just doesn't come with all of the functionality and interactivity that we saw with Angular. I think Angular forms are really cool in the sense that you get so much functionality without having to explore every single aspect and create all the logic behind validations. Which, trust me, text validation is a whole nother beast of its own. Awesome. Is there any other questions or these are great questions, by the way. Thank you so much for being this interactive. Really appreciate it. Awesome. If not, I will come back to here. Once again, feel free to check out the slides that I sent over. And it was really wonderful to just meet everyone at this webinar. And hopefully you guys learned a thing or two about reactive forms or TinyMCE.
All right. Thank you very much, Myrna. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Hope to see you guys again. I think we have another webinar coming up in a couple weeks. So we're going to check this out. And we'll see you guys next time.